Hi Year 10s, welcome back. Today we are doing solving quadratic equations using factorising. So so what we're going to do is use our skills from factorising that we've already done in our previous few lessons, and now we're going to solve the equation. So copy down the notes. And don't worry about all the other examples because we'll do them in a minute. So back on me and so I'll explain what we're going to do. To solve an equation, remember when you've got a variable or a pronumeral, you want to find the value of that unknown or the pronumeral. So you want to get that by itself. And I've said here by making it the subject. That just means that whatever that pronumeral is on the side of the equation by itself. For example, you get y equals something. Y is the subject because it's by itself. Alright, and there's a thing called the Null Factor Law. Now this is very important, this is key for the whole next few exercises. The Null Factor Law says, if you've got two different things, don't worry, they're just symbols, a times b, if that equals 0, then either a is equal to 0 to make this whole expression 0, or b is equal to 0, or both. So what we do is we use this theory when we've got factorised expressions. So that is pretty much a theory. I'm just going to show you heaps of examples of how to do this, and then hopefully you'll be alright. So I've said here, note best, you must factorise the equation first. So before you solve anything, you must have factorised form. If it's not factorised, do not try to use the Null Factor Law. It must be factorised form. Okay, so remember it's something times something equals 0. 0 must be on the other side of the equation. Here's our first thing, we've got x, and it's times in by, our second thing is x minus 3. So according to the Null Factor Law, we let each of these things separately equal 0. So this one's easy, it's just x equals 0, because it's by itself. So that's our first term. And the second bit is x minus 3. We let that equal 0 as well. And now we solve this as a little mini equation. So you plus 3 to both sides, and you get x equals 3. So we've got two solutions for this equation. We've got x equals 0 and x equals 3. Good job. It'll get a little bit easier as we go. So have a look here, this is pretty simple, this one. There's our first term, x minus 4, and our second term is x plus 5. They're being multiplied together and it equals 0, so we can use the Null Factor Law. So remember what that says, we'll let the first bit equal 0, so x minus 4 equals 0, and also let the second bit equal 0, so we've got x plus 5 equals 0. Now what we do is we solve each of these separately. So plus 4 to both sides, and you get x equals 4. And this one here, you've got minus 5 to both sides, and you get x equals minus 5. Sometimes I put a line down there just to separate them. So my two answers are x equals 4 and x equals minus 5. It's really simple, just like both bits equal 0. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So you can copy these down as we go, that's fine. So have a look here, the first one is x squared minus 2x equals 0. Now what was the one rule that I said about before we use the Null Factor Law? You must factorise the expression first. That is not factorised, so that's what we're going to do first. X is a common factor, so we take out x, and then we're left with x minus 2 equals 0. And that was the only hard step, only thing that's different, and then there's our two terms. The first one's x, next one's x minus 2. So here we can say x is equal to 0 from that one, and x minus 2 is equal to 0, so x is equal to 2. So our two answers here are x equals 0 from that one, and this one gave us x equals 2. So there are two answers. Good job. Next one, x squared minus 15. You might struggle, you might have forgotten about this bit, but it's a surd. If we can factorise this in surd form using dots. I'll put the step in, it's the same as x squared minus root 15 squared, if you remember that, equals 0. So we can say x plus root 15, x minus root 15. I bet you forgot how to do that. Now, using the Null Factor Law, we let this bit equal 0 and that bit equals 0. So we've got x plus root 15 equals 0. I may as well solve it now. X equals negative root 15. And this one here, we get x minus root 15 equals 0 and x equals positive root 15. Now our two answers are negative root 15 and positive root 15. Sometimes you can just write it like that, plus or minus root 15, and that is fine. There is another way to do this same question, and I'll show you just really quickly. X squared minus 15 equals 0. You can do it either way. So we can go x squared is equal to 15. Now to get x by itself, we square root both sides and we get x equals square root 15. However, a lot of people only get one answer here. They forget that the answer here is plus or minus root 15. So you have to remember that. So if you do this method, remember it's plus or minus. There are two answers. So I prefer this way, and then I just know that I've got my two answers. Good job. Next one. Okay, we've got 2x squared equals 50. Remember the rule with the Null Factor Law? One side must be equal to 0. So we need to get everything over to one side. So we've got 2x squared minus 50 equals 0. Unless you use the second method, of course. You could have done that. I'll just do this method. Now we've got to divide. Look at that, it's a common factor. The first rule of factorising, always look for a common factor. So 2 is a common factor. So I'm going to divide every term by 2, including this side there. And watch what happens. The 2's cancel. I'm left with x squared minus 25 equals 0. So the 2's effectively disappeared. So now we can do x minus, that's the same as x squared minus 5 squared equals 0. So it's just x plus 5, x minus 5. Hopefully you can see that stops. And so x equals minus 5 here and plus 5 there. So I'm just going to write plus or minus 5. That's a shortcut way of writing both of them. If you're not sure how I got that, do each one separately and you'll get plus 5 and minus 5. Good job. Have a break if you need to. If you need to start the exercise, that's fine. But have a look up here. So this is a trinomial. We've factorised these before. So there's no common factor. Always look for a common factor first. So I write my two brackets. Remember how to do these. X squared. So it's an x and an x. It's a plus at the end, which means it's both the same sign. And because it's a negative, they're both going to be negatives. Now I'll look for factors of 6. And we want the sum to be 5. So 6 and 1 is not going to work. So I'm going to put 3 and 2. 3 and 2 will give us minus 3x minus 5x. Oh, minus 2x, which gives minus 5x. So there's our factorised expression, and now we can say x minus 3 equals 0, so x equals 3, and x minus 2 equals 0, so x equals 2. Good job, everyone. Next one. Look at this one. We factorise exactly the same, but hopefully you can see that this is something special. This is a square number and a square number. One's a square number. This is actually called a perfect square. So there is a shortcut rule for that. You could work out, I'll do it in a sec, I'll do it the long way. So x and x, they're both pluses, and the factors of 1 are 1 and 1. So it's just x plus 1 all squared is equal to 0. But it's sometimes easier just leaving it like that. So we can work out x plus 1 equals 0, so x equals minus 1. If we did the same one there, x plus 1 equals 0, x equals minus 1. So we've got the same answer twice. So you don't need to write it twice, you can just say x is equal to negative 1. There's only one answer, one solution to that problem there. Alright. Okay, a couple more. Now we get on to the harder type that we've done. So this is bringing together all your knowledge of factorising over the last few lessons. So it's a good revision lesson. So 10x squared, it's a non-monic. It's not a number 1 out the front of that. Always look for a common factor first, but there's no factors. So I'm going to have to do the two brackets. And it's a tricky one. So we've got 10. So it could be a 10x and a 1x. But I'm going to have a crack and say 5x and 2x. Most likely, most of the time it's that. Factors of 3 are 3 and 1. And it's a negative. So one's a plus and one's a minus. I'll leave the sign to later. And I want the difference to be 13x. So if I put a 3 that goes with a 5x, that there will give me, when I work it out, that will give me 15x. So the 3 there, if I put a 1 there, that will give me a 2x. So the difference between those is 13x, so which one do I want to be negative? The whole thing has to be negative 13x, so I want this one to be negative. So I put the negative there and the positive there, so that gives me negative 15x when I expand it, plus 2x, which gives a negative 13x. Hopefully you remember that from previous exercises. Now, we've got 5x plus 1 is equal to 0. A couple of steps to solve it. 5x equals negative 1, x equals negative 1 on 5. So negative 1/5. Remember, it's the same as writing negative 1 over 5. Doesn't matter if the negative's on top or just out the front. Next one, 2x minus 3 equals 0. 2x equals positive 3. X equals 3 over 2. So there's two answers, negative a fifth and 3 over 2. I'd leave it as a fraction form, don't change it to 1.5, but that's okay. Good job. One more over here before we go on. Now look at this one. It's got a 2 out the front of that, but what's the first rule of factorising? Always look for a common factor. There's a 2 there, a 20 and a 22. I can divide all these terms by 2, including the last one, and the 2 effectively disappears. So I can just say x squared minus 10x minus 11 equals 0. The 2's disappeared because I've divided every term by 2, including the 0. So now I can just work this out. So that was the one trick with this question. It just had a common factor. If you tried to do it as a non-monic, it'd make things more complicated. So x, one's a plus, one's a minus. I'm going to make it factors over 11, 11 and 0. So I'll make it minus 11, 11 and 1. Make it 11 there and 1 there. So give me minus 11x plus 1x is minus 10x. So now I've got x plus 1 equals 0, x equals negative 1, x minus 11 equals 0, x equals positive 11. Can you see, as you practice, they get quicker and quicker. You should get a little bit easier, find them a bit easier. Alright, now the hardest two questions we've got, here's an equation, but it says one side of the equation must be equal to 0. So remember that with the Null Factor Law? So first thing we need to do is expand the brackets here. So we've got 2x plus 48. Now, we want one side to be equal to 0. Try to make the x squared side positive, so bring everything to this side. So we've got x squared minus 2x minus 48 is equal to 0. See, now we've got a trinomial, the other side's equal to 0, and now we factorise as usual and then solve. So x squared, so we can say x and x. It's a negative, so one's a plus, one's a minus. Now you've got to try and be good with your factors. 48, 12 fours are 48, that's not going to work. 6 eights are 48, that sounds good to me. So 6 times 8 is 48. So just mental maths there. Okay, so 6 and 8. I want the 8 to be negative and the positive to be 6. So then I've got negative 2x. Okay, so I've got x plus 6 equals 0, x equals negative 6. X minus 8 is equal to 0, x equals positive 8. So my two solutions are x equals negative 6 and x equals 8. And exactly the same again, but another type of question. So this side is divided by x, so how do we get rid of that? We times both sides by x, because then they will cancel. So we've got x plus 20 equals x squared. So that was our first step you need to go to do. Now remember, I want the x squared to be positive, so I'm going to bring everything to this side of the equation. So 0 equals x squared minus x minus 20. If you like having that on the left, feel free to just rewrite it. I'm going to do that. X squared minus x minus 20 equals 0. Do the two brackets, so we're factorising x and x. One's a plus, one's a minus. Factors of 20, a difference of 1, 4 and 5. So I want the 5 to be negative and the 4 to be positive, because that'll give me the negative 1x. And now we solve using Null Factor Law. So x equals negative 4, x minus 5 equals 0, x equals 5. Alright, so hopefully you're okay with that, everyone. You have to remember how to do all your factorising skills, and then the Null Factor Law, when you've got two things multiplied together that equal 0, each of them equals 0, and you'll get two answers most of the time. Here's your homework, everyone, exercise 5F. You can have a look there. 11 is a challenge question like these last two, so make sure you have a go at those. And I will see you next time. Smash that like button.